Hello, it's me, Mr. Nichols. Here I am giving you the research paper video because it's about time to write the research paper. Now that you've submitted the research paper planning, you've submitted the annotated bibliography and received at least a 50 back on it. You've also had to, I assume, get the planning back with at least an 8. And you have to submit the research paper peer review first, but before you can submit that research paper peer review, you have to write the paper, and there's no sense in just writing something, submitting it for peer review, and then hoping you can move on to your research paper. It's best to submit something that works. So you want to submit an acceptable draft according to the peer review assignment, and that would involve just writing a research paper to the best of your ability that meets the criteria that I lay out. So let's go in as Magnus Baraka, and I'm going to walk you through the research paper rubric as well as what the sample research paper does well and how to try to replicate that in your own paper. So let's go here to English 1301. Let's go down to weekly course content. Now we're all the way down in week 11. So all we have this week, you can see, is I've already got the peer review video here, and that's below the research video, which you're going to see right here. The only issue with this is I had to put the peer review second because you have to write a research paper first, then you're going to do the peer review, and then I might have another little video where I say, okay, now just submit the research paper because you got the peer review in. And if I need to do that, I will. If people ask for that, they're like, it's confusing. The peer review is afterwards, but hopefully that's not an issue. So the peer review, Magnus Baraka can move on to the peer review, and he already has. He's submitted it, so he can move on to the research paper. Once you have done that, I've already submitted a research paper. Look at me. It's amazing. You want to go to the assignment packet again. Always, it might be just good to save this thing if you haven't already. And I'll go down because we've already talked about we've already submitted the planning, we've submitted the annotated bibliography. The research paper peer review is next. But that is in the other video. If you want to watch that video first, go ahead. But it's just showing how to do that assignment. And if you don't have a paper yet, that's going to be kind of useless. So my suggestion is to watch this one first because that's the order I've put it in. And it says that you basically just use your research materials that you've gathered, which you already have knowledge of because of the annotated bibliography. And I explained in the last video about annotated bibliography that's the whole goal of that assignment, is to make you familiar with your research. So you take that knowledge you now have to make the case that you were going to make in your thesis, that this is what should happen regarding this topic for this reason. And you'll use the whole paper to do that. So it's 1,250 to 2,500 words. And that is roughly 5 to 7 pages, but it's about 4.5 pages of double spaced, I think, is 1,250 words. You just have to make sure it's organized well, moves forward on your points, and you just kind of follow a set structure the whole time. Don't go off on irrelevant side details. Make sure that everything you say is representative, relevant, typical, and sufficient, and then everything should go fine. You do have to follow the APA formatting for a paper. So my best suggestion is to go down below and see the sample, which I will show you in a second, of how to lay that out. It lays it out fairly well. But that means you need to have a title page, an abstract page, a references page afterwards. And that does require you to take the references page that you use for your planning assignment and use it again for the research paper, but you'll have to paste the whole thing to the end of your research paper. You cannot submit a research paper without your references page included. And it's ideal, I really need you to do this, paste the references page to the end of your document. I do not want it uploaded as a separate document, nor do I, especially I will not grade it this way if it's uploaded as a separate attempt. That's almost impossible for me to grade because of the way it's structured and how I have to approach it. It's just very difficult. So you need to support the thesis through convincing argument, and the argument will exist through adequate and appropriate use of sources. Have a complete references page in APA style. You'll have to use in-text citation as well, which I'll show you how I set up and grade a paper and it generally starts off with me checking to make sure all the sources are in place. This is where 20%, it's got to be a controversial topic and thesis, not something that's an undeniable fact, must be valid research, and you must have a references page and internal citation. If you don't have a references page and internal citation, both of those, not one or the other, but both, then you'll get a 0 and you'll be asked to submit it again until you have the correct things in place. So you have to have internal citation and you have to have the references. Without those, it's not going to work. So let me go back up here, go down to the sample paper, and show you what I meant by title page, abstract, and all that stuff. So this is what a title page looks like, and you don't want to have the word sample research paper, of course, but your very first page needs to say running head and have a page number on the right side, which I can show you how to do in a minute. And you need to have, a title page that meets these criteria. This title of your paper. The title of your paper. Then you have your name. Then you have the date. Then you have the class. Then you have parish and your college. On the second page, you'll have an abstract, but that's you summarizing your own paper. So you're trying to give me a summary, which usually I just kind of skim that real quick, make sure it's there, then I skip past it and go and read the actual paper. Because this is what's most important to me is the actual paper. You have the words research paper, and notice how every page past the first does not say running head, it just has the head after that. I'll show you how to do that as well. But it says research paper, it says implementing comprehensive sex education, 6th grade, rural public education in the United States, then you do 2 spaces, then you start the paper. The paper goes on and continues and make its argument using the research. Then the last page of it is the references page, which still has the running head on it and a page number. And it includes all the citations in all the citations in APA style. And this student is a little different than most students where she has DOI numbers for 3 of her sources. And it's changed the way that it's displayed recently, so technically speaking, you could just copy paste yours and they'll have the links where they look like links with no period at the end. That's fine. And then this one right here did not have a DOI number for whatever reason. So it says AN and it's got that reference number that I told students about. And then this one, I asked her to include one from the ENGL databases because she wanted to be one of the example students. And she managed to write a paper that was good enough where she could. ENGL has its own reference number system, but it's a little more difficult to find, a little more difficult to use. The reference number system for Academic Search Complete's easier. You'll be like, well, that one was hard to do, so imagine harder for ENGL opposing viewpoints. So that is the sample of what it looks like. I give like my feedback there, but I want to concentrate before we get to the paper and the reading of it on the research paper rubric. So my research paper rubric does include what it is that I'm grading on the research paper, what I'm looking for. However, it does not include something that research papers usually, or any kind of rubric usually includes. And does anybody know what that is? That's right, points. Usually they include points values, for each one of these things I'll have like, 10, 20, something like that, points all the way down the line. Mine does not include that. The reason mine does not include that is, well, instead I'm going to tell you a story. Let's say, hypothetically, Nichols is applying for this job as a PJC English instructor at the Greenville campus. And so he goes, he interviews for the job. After the resume, he sends out the resume and they're, like the resume, so they call me in for an interview. I do pretty well in the interview, and then I go and have to do a teaching demonstration. I actually had to do that for this job. I had to go teach a lesson to the people who would eventually be my bosses, and they would participate in the lesson that I had, and then after that they would go and deliberate. So all the candidates have gone, they go and deliberate, and the whole conversation between the people who are deciding seems a little weird. Okay, it seems like this. So, Nichols, he seemed to... he had a good interview, really good teaching demonstration. It was very engaging. Just really all around, he seemed to be head and shoulders above the rest. I mean, does anybody else have anything that they want to say? I mean, does he seem like the candidate we're going to go for, or so it's a little lack of comfort here for some reason. And then one person goes, yeah, I had a question. Nobody mentioned this, but was he wearing like I'm sorry for this phrasing, but like a wife beater style tank top and like Daisy Duke cut off denim shorts? And like the shirt had like a big fat like mustard or something stain on it. Did anybody else see this? Like, was I the only one? And then finally they all started chiming in. Oh no, yeah, I totally saw this. I totally saw. I thought I was imagining it. I was like, I was gonna go to the doctor after this and like get checked out and make sure that my levels were okay. Like, so we all saw this. I mean, he was acting like he wasn't wearing it at all. And like, I know, right? I was like, he was completely normal. And I mean, guys, he was on point. The interview was great. The teaching administration was fine, but he was wearing that wife beater style tank top and Daisy Duke cutoff short and the mustard stain. Man, he could have at least washed I mean, he's wearing that, so I mean, it doesn't really matter. And like the flip flops. He was wearing flip flops. They didn't even match. I mean, they were green, which kind of matches blue, but it doesn't match the mustard stain. I don't know. It was all so weird. So I mean, can we hire a guy like that? And it was, no, we can't hire him. And he was really great in the interview, great in teaching administration. You just can't hire somebody like that. I mean, is he going to wear that in front of the kid? I don't know. Was it a joke? I mean, was it we like being like punked? Was this like a Borat movie or something? Like, I don't know what's going on. Like, okay, I don't know. Guess we can't hire him. So, well, who are we going to go with next? And that is why I don't include points on a rubric. Is that not enough? Okay. Well, anything done badly enough can ruin an otherwise great thing. If I had shown up to that interview and just been phenomenal, but I wore an inappropriate outfit, it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter how good I was because the inappropriate outfit would ruin everything. And that's one of the reasons I don't like to put point values on essay rubrics. Because let's say that I say, okay, well, guys, you got to have 20 points for the references, and somebody says, well, I'll just write a research paper that has no references. And what am I going to do? Just sit there and go, oh, darn it. This person, they tricked me. Guess I'll give them an 80. No, I can't do that. Because anything done badly enough on a research paper can ruin the whole research paper. So let's go through what this rubric contains, and then we'll cover what that will do, and I'll cover along the way, or try to cover along the way, what that'll do to your points, okay? So your research paper has to contain some kind of thesis, all right? That thesis needs to make a claim about what should happen regarding an issue. You don't need to just report. That's a common problem, is people will just report on me, or report for me the different aspects of the issue. I don't want that. I want you to make a case, argue what should happen regarding that issue. You need to give a general reason that claim should be trusted by the reader. So it's not just you're saying abortion should be illegal abortion should be illegal. You can't just say that. You have to say abortion should be legal for this reason. So don't be vague, be specific about that claim. And if you are doing research and you're basically finding that teenage abortion specifically should be illegal, make that claim. Just be as specific as you can be, or as the research seems to indicate you should be. And also include some sort of solution in the paper of what should happen. If the topic itself is not controversial enough, and sometimes it might not be, include some solution of what should happen. Because maybe, like I talked about before, cancer is not controversial on its own, but the way in which we handle cancer research funding could be. It's kind of like providing health care isn't that controversial. However, how we fund health care as a society is controversial. And so next we have, and if you don't have a thesis on your paper, same as the beginning of the semester, highest you can go is a 50. But hopefully that'll be stamped out in the research paper planning phase, won't be an issue. Now references page and the sources being cited when claims are made, That's going to be your references and your internal citations. So that's incredibly important. I'll go ahead and straight up tell you that if you don't have a references page on your research paper, or you don't have an internal citation for every single time you're referencing one of those research articles, and you have not mentioned all 5 of your articles inside the paper as well as on the references page, then the highest you can get on this paper is a 0. So if you give it to me without a references page, I'll give you a 0 and say, please put a references page. If you miss your internal citations, I'll say, you missed your internal citations. Here's a 0. And I'm going to show you how to do those internal citations here in a minute. It's the same as what we talked about in the APA citation lesson that I showed you while I was gone. But it basically is just using the last name of the author, the year, and the page number within the body of the text, so that when people see that, they say, okay, this last name, what does that relate to? And they go to the references page and find that last name and say, okay, it came from that research. It's basically a way of keeping track of what information you've used so that people can trace the kind of the lineage of your ideas, the origins of it, back to its beginnings. So the references page should only contain sources used in the paper, and they, remember, should all have different authors and publications. It should be formatted properly in APA style. So I believe I showed you on one of the videos already how to do that. If not, I'll go through that briefly here. Contains reliable, valid sources. That should be solved by following all my directions about how to go to Academic Search Complete and do scholarly peer reviewed. At least have 5 citations. You can have publications get repeated, but you'd have to have more than 5 in order for that to be the case. You have to have at least 5 citations here, but you could go 6 and then only represent 5 journals. First order of citation should appear internally, so the author's name is what I mean, within year, page number, that kind of thing. And then sources are cited when claims are made. So your internal citation should be properly formatted, like I told you with the last name, year, page number. And then the sources should be valid to their purpose, credible, and free of conflict of interest. So anytime that you're using a quote or you're using ideas, paraphrasing from one of the pieces of research, you should be quite clear that that's where that's coming from, and that it has a purpose in the place that you have it. And on top of just having the sources, which is what those 2 criteria were about, and if you don't include those, remember it's a 0. I'll get back to you and say, please submit again. You have to have those sources be relevant, representative, typical, and sufficient. So you can't have the sources do work that they don't actually do. If I go and I find that, like, you have a source that you say proves that marijuana should not be legal, and I look and it's somebody who says, well, there was somebody who smoked a doobie in, I don't know what I call it, a doobie. Somebody who smoked a marijuana at my apartment complex, and they fell asleep, and then the apartment complex burned down. And so whenever you smoke marijuana, it burns apartment complexes down. That's a specific anecdotal scenario, and I'm going to use the word anecdotal evidence. Doesn't work. I'm going to say that phrase probably in a lot of papers, because somebody telling their own individual story doesn't mean that's how it works for everybody. That might just be that specific person's situation. So another thing you need to do is not mostly rely just on one source. That's a way to keep it relevant and representative, or representative and sufficient. Don't rely just mostly on individual experiences, which I already mentioned. Don't focus on rare cases. Make sure that it's the typical case. Remember I was talking to you all about how, like in the argument for masks, it's better to go with the thousands of doctors group than this single doctor has this one idea group. You need to provide enough research to prove your points. Make sure you're only using scholarly peer-reviewed academic journal source from Academic Search Complete only, unless there's something that I've specifically approved for you in advance on the research paper planning assignment, which is very rare, likely not going to happen. Then, and I know it's weird to have this right down at the bottom, of like we have 4 above this, and then we have logic, which you think logic's very important. But honestly, I am more likely to give a high grade to something with poor logic that attempts to use its sources correctly than I am something that has great logic but doesn't have good use of sources. It's one of the things, like, I've heard some people before say, like, well, my papers were really good, but the teacher didn't like them. And I said, well, what was wrong with him? I kept saying like I didn't use my sources. And I was like, well, it doesn't matter how good you are at making a logical argument. If you can't acknowledge the content in sources that are credible, there's only so far logic can take you. It's kind of like a scaffolding effect where, two people kind of help lift each other up. Like if you're willing to be, you're like, I'm a great writer and I come up with great ideas, but you're not willing to read the ideas of others, there's only so high you can go. And that actually does bear out in reading ability when people who have writing and reading ability together. If you want to be a writer, a really great writer, and you start writing, your writing ability can only go so high before you need to start reading to pull that writing ability up. So this even bears out in psychology of education as well. So with your logic, make sure that your sources support all the logic that you have. So if you're making a connection between ideas using that inductive reasoning, make sure that your sources support that inductive reasoning, even if they aren't talking about specifically the idea that you're connecting. Make sure that your opinions do not appear in the form of rants. This usually happens when people have no idea what their research says and only use them for quotes on occasion. You end up ranting, but I want you to keep in mind that ranting is something that does not work on me generally. And what I consider to be ranting is when you go off on like a long, I want to use the word diatribe, but ranting is easier to understand than that. You go off on a long kind of story on your own where you're explaining how something works, and you're like, look, here's how it is. And you kind of go off. In fact, go off is probably a good way of saying it. But in that particular scenario, you're using a lot of like emotional language, like pathos, and you're not really truly making your case, but you think you are. In fact, let me give you a great scenario. There was a time when I was a substitute at Quinlan, Ford High School, a long time ago, and I could feel all the Quinlan students like just now, like, oh, did I hear Quinlan? Yeah, I did. I said Quinlan. A long time ago, I'm talking like 15, 20 years ago, I was a substitute at Quinlan. And one of the things that I did there was I did a whole lot of like computer class monitoring because one of the computer teachers, I think, was a coach, and his wife was pregnant and had a baby that semester, so he was out a lot. So I ended up being able to take over a whole bunch of his classes. Another thing I did was I took over for the drama and speech teacher frequently. And weirdly enough, the drama teacher had like 2 drama classes and the rest were all speech classes. So one of the classes that I did one time was just a speech class, but for whatever reason, I have no idea why. Usually you would show a movie, right? I think I showed so many like Shakespeare movies, Much Ado About Nothing or something. And then speech movies, didn't even make any sense. I was showing it for Remember the Titans or something. But one class, I guess they didn't have any other time for this, so the teacher said, judge these debates, pick winners, report that back to me. I was like, okay. And it was very strange, but I did it. And one of the times that there was a debate, I remember this one very clearly. It was a guy who got up and he started talking. He was very quiet. Kind of a short guy. And I was listening to the points that he was making, but he was saying stuff like, without sex education, people don't know how sex works, and when they go and they have sex, they're not prepared, and they end up getting a lot of teen pregnancies and as STDs as well, and that's why the pregnancy rates and STD rates are so high in the teenage population in states that don't have comprehensive sex education. So abstinence only sex education really isn't as effective as people think it is. And he was just going on like that for like a long time. But I was listening real closely because like the kids were kind of chatty, but he was so quiet I had to like really pay attention. I was like, okay, got it. And then like it was a weird style of debate. It wasn't like real debate. It was like literally like one person would stand, the other person would sit down, and the other person would stand up again. And that was it. It was over. So then this girl gets up. She's about the same height as him, but she is like a spitfire. Like she reminded me, I guess, a lot of my daughter Carly right now, but like with a brain that could argue and stuff. My daughter's not very good at arguing. She always has the same argument, which is I want. But this girl, she gets up and she's something, I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but not very much. She was like, okay, so with sex education, first of all, what is he even talking about? Like, if you have sex, then you are going to get pregnant or you're going to have an STD. So why wouldn't you just make it where you tell them not to have sex? Because if you don't have sex, then you're not going to get pregnant and you're not going to get STD. Like, what he just said is kind of stupid. And, like, she was being, like, really rude and, like, dismissive of him and using, like, this insulting language. And then she was like, and first of all, and also, if you get pregnant and, like, you know not to get pregnant, like, because you're not supposed to have sex, and you get pregnant, then that is, like, your own fault, and, like, you should raise that baby because it is your fault, and you should have to deal with that yourself, and you should take that punishment, and you should run with it. And, like, just all kinds of stuff doesn't make any sense. She's just, like, saying stuff and, like, being very, like, morally superior. And when she got done, and she was like, and that is all I have to say, and she sits down, and everybody's like, yeah, woo, because, like, she had friends or whatever. And when I scored the debate, I was like, yeah, he won. Like, everybody was, like, cheering for her, but he obviously won. He was quiet, but his points were far clearer, and the things that he was saying were very logical. She, however, was giving this ranty opinion, which you can't do. Because if you're talking about logic and who's making the best logical point, in your case, sources are going to be useful for that. But if you're not using sources, it's likely you're going to drop into this rant format like she was just doing. And I don't want people to do that. That's why it's very important to make sure that your logic is tested and accurate. So you test it both by making sure that the ideas that you're saying make sense, that they're kind of bulletproof in that sense, that they connect very well. If that's not the case, then you make sure that the research that you're finding helps make that case for you, that they're the ones testing it, they're the ones who are verifying it's accurate. And additionally, it's important that you try to make sure that this is free of personal bias. One of the best ways to do that, I had said in the argumentation lesson, was from week, 10, I think, maybe even week 9, was to make sure that you don't pick a topic that you have a personal relationship to or that you realize you cannot be objective on. Because if you do that, it's almost impossible to keep your bias out of it. Like, if you know strongly in your heart your feelings on abortion, and no article you go out and read is going to change your feelings on abortion, then why are you doing it? Like, why are you researching? Just for a grade? It's going to be very hard for you to make the case for me that this should be what's true if you weren't even convinced by the research. If you're reading the research, and it's very clear to me when a student already felt something before they started writing. So I just want you to know that. So logic is this point of the list, and ethos. So a lot of things fall into the category of ethos for me. The lowest of the low is like spelling, grammatical, typographical errors. Those are my bottom of the list because some people just can't spell. Some people are not good at grammar. You do what you can with Grammarly, which I assume a lot of people use now. Just because you can do it as like a free plugin in your app and whatever. But typographical errors are definitely the ones that bother me the most because those aren't people not spelling or being grammatical. That's like that one time when like a student, they were writing about fracking and accidentally included the F word. And it was a really bad scenario too. They said like, it's important that every state be involved with fracking so they can get the most out of the gas pockets, or it was just something really bad. Like, it was like, oh gosh, that's even worse. But they used the F word in their paper, and I was like, that just means you didn't go back and read it and see it. Like, how do you read over a paper again slowly to make sure before you turn it in, and you don't catch the F word? I just had trouble believing that. So to me, typographical error is the one where you literally just aren't paying attention. Those are the worst because it means you didn't care enough. Having the paper be varied in style, I mean, that's kind of important, but it's more important to me that it be third person only, that you're not writing in first person. And the other stuff is stuff like formatting, making sure you have the title page, abstract, proper header, Times Roman, 12-point font, 1-inch page margins, different first page heading than the rest of the pages, having that heading throughout, having page numbers. All that stuff is important, but like not as important. And Making the paper respectful to the reader and other viewpoints. Make sure it does not insult the reader. It provides helpful transitions, and its introduction introduces controversy. This is basically stuff that just makes you look credible. It's like the suit you're wearing. Making sure your essay just looks nice, and it's clear and easy to understand. That kind of stuff falls into that last category. Doesn't mean I'm not looking at it. Doesn't mean it's not important. And anything done badly enough can drag the whole paper down. Like if you get just lazy and you're like, I know Spanish, I don't know English, I'm going to write the whole paper in Spanish. I don't know how to read Spanish. And if I go through it and translate, I don't even know if that's accurate. So that wouldn't work. Same with Turkish, French, German, Mandalorian. That's not a language. So that is the research paper rubric, but I want to go back up here to the top and then scroll back down to the sample paper, and we'll finally read through this paper and see what it does so well. So here's this sample research paper. We're going to go through now and check out and see what it does well along with that research paper rubric. So what I want to do first is copy paste this into another file so that I can work with just it. And what I'm going to do here, I believe, is I've already done this and put it in a folder, so I've got it. So I'm going to go to my research folder here, and you can see I have research articles that I've thrown around, and then I have my research paper as a PDF. So this is kind of how I'll be searching it, like when I do my actual reading of it, once I do that. Like once I do like the actual showing you how I would grade it and how I would read it, it's going to be right here. I do want to show you first, though, just real quick, how to get this paper ready. So follow my actions very closely here. This is the formatting for the research paper. You have to make sure that in the whole paper, probably before you start writing, that you highlight the whole thing. This is Control A I just clicked, and that does, I believe, file select all or something like that. I don't even know how you do it normally. Maybe you just click and you say select all. Edit. It's usually under edit, so I don't really see that. So you need to have basically Control A, and you need to do the paragraph settings and make sure it's 0 everywhere on the left and right, and make sure there's no indent, no line spacing when you start. Okay. Then I suggest doing double spacing on a per page basis. In fact, you might double space the whole thing. This particular, you can see like how I have it lined up. I happen to find it easier, instead of doing a full vertical center on the page, you can see that all I did was hit enter a bunch of times, and then I started my title. So you want to make sure you have the title of your article, or your title of your paper. Then you have your name, you have the dates, the class, and the college. The reason I like it to look like this is because I feel it looks like a little more prestigious to have the title a little further up on the page. I really don't like it when it's way down here. I want it to have almost like a Superman's emblem kind of effect, Batman's emblem, not like a in the center of the belly kind of feel. And to me, it almost looks like the ratio of like a chest, like a superhero chest. So that's how I've always thought about it. Then on the abstract, you can see that one actually just goes to the top of the page, and it doesn't have any kind of tabbing on the paragraph. It just has double spacing. So abstract is in the center, so you click the center justified, and then right here you click the left, and it'll put all that stuff on the left. Now for the rest of the document, when you get to the end of a page, by the way, there's a little trick you can do where you can either find some place on the document that says page break, or hit Control Enter. Control Enter will make this page jump to a new page. And the same with this abstract page. Once you get to the end, you hit Control Enter, and it jumps it right back up here. And everything you put on that page will stay there. So I've got the title of research paper, and then I have the actual title of the research paper from the title page, but in single space, which I prefer here. And then you got 2 spaces in single, and then you have a double, which is a little weird, but I don't know. It gives it that nice look to me. And then you have the whole paper in double spacing. And if I go up here to the paragraph settings, you'll actually have 0 left, 0 right, 0 before, 0 after, but you'll have a special first line indent of a 1/2 inch. I'm sorry, special first line indent of a 1/2 inch. I don't want to mess with it because I don't want to mess the lines up. I don't know what this person's got going on and why it's different. Oh, it's because there's a single space like quoting paragraph right there. That's why I don't mess it up. And then with line spacing, you want to have double, and just make sure you start writing it that way. Now note that for quotes in APA, you actually tab it over, and a long quote, anything that goes longer than like 4 lines, that needs to be set off on its own so that it's very clear when you're doing very large quotes. And then you have your references page. Notice it's pasted to the end. If you don't include this, you're going to get a 0. So make sure you include this. Now you might be wondering, how do I get the heading on the top of the page? Well, what you do is you can double click and that'll get you to the header, or you can find like the header footer settings. I think it's under like, let's see if we just go down here. How do you do that? It's like review, view, design, layout, insert. It's somewhere here. Yeah, header footer. So once you do a header, you're going to want to set that to not one of these stupid like designy options. I don't want those. Just do it basic. And the easiest way to me is still double clicking, so I'm just going to do that and type running head. And then you do this all caps version of your title where like you preserve the big words, but you shorten the small things that are easy to understand. So implementing, there's no real way to shorten that. So, but comprehensive, I put comp, sex ed, I know sex ed, in rural pub ed, public education in US. So that shortens everything, but with the word running head at the front. And I think what you do is you click here and then you click the box that says different first page. And I really can't remember what happens. What happens is like when you click the different first page checkbox, it'll either make this completely go away and it'll start appearing on all the rest of the pages, or it'll stay here and everything that was on the rest of the pages will go away. Regardless, you need to make sure that the running head part appears on the first page. So you might have to toy with either clicking the checkbox when you're on this page or clicking on the other one. But once you click that, it means that now there are 2 separate areas, one that's on the first page and the one that's on the rest. So just make sure that you take the part that says running head. So if it changes it and it's blank, you're like, oh no. Well, type in running head and then the title. And then up here, I actually found the best way to do this is to go to page number, top of page, and then you go down to, where is it? Current position. You just put a page number, plain number. And wherever you have the cursor at that time, it's going to put it. Then you scroll down, and this might be blank, or it might say running head just like before. Just take away the running head part. And then do the same thing where you do page number, current position, page number, and it's going to keep up with the numbering of the earlier one. That'll do enough to get you your header and footer. Or actually, you don't need a footer. I don't know why I said footer. Then you'll save it. You'll submit it either as a docx or a PDF to the research paper link, which y'all have done that many times before now. You know how to do that. Just make sure that you have the references page included. That is essential for me to grade it. I will not grade it without it. In fact, I'll give every paper a 0 that didn't have it, and I'll say, please include it. And it'll be like a stock paragraph where I say, I noticed you didn't include the references page. You must include the references page to get it graded. But then I've submitted it, okay? So let's say that Nichols is grading it. And here is how I would grade it. First of all, I'm going to have it in front of me, and I'm going to do something very simple. I'm going to go down to the end of the document. I'm going to scroll in a bit so you can see. Very end of the document, go to the references page, and I'm going to make sure that every single one of these sources is referenced within this paper properly through internal citation that mentions every source's last name. I can check that very simply. I hit Control F and I do beh, and I see the word behaviors, unfortunately. But I'm just going to hope. There's only 9 results up here, you can tell. So that's going to be good enough for me. So I see already 1. That's 1. And all I need is 1 reference. I need it to be mentioned 1 time in the paper. She mentions it 2 times. So that's fine. Now I do the next one that says Blinn Pike. Blinn. There's one. Piotrowski. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's this page again. Stanger Hall. There it is. Much of this debate is blah, blah, blah. Then I have Walcott. There. Now I've verified that all of the sources have been referenced in the paper, internally and through the references page, and I can move on. And I've already done the grading of the references page, but I'll just check to make sure. Bae, Blinn, Piotrowski, Stanger, Walcott, and then we have Columbia Journal of General Law, Sex Education, American Journal of Public Health, +1, Psychology in the Schools, that's 5 different journals. Then I make sure they all have reference numbers, so reference number, DOI, 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 and I also make sure that they have the right page lengths. So this is 12 plus, which I can verify is a little bit longer. 77 to 92, that's more than 10. 132 to 139, I believe that's her 6 to 10 page one. Then we have 1 to 11, that's 10 pages, and then we have 828 to 842, that is more than 10 pages as well. So that's got to be her 6 to 10 page one, and then I go up here and I look, and that one's really long. I think it's actually 40 or something. I can't recall. But now I can go ahead and grade it and read it. So what I'm going to do is go up here and read this sample paper for you and show you how I would grade it. So I make sure you have a title page, and I go, good. That's about it. Abstract, I go, okay, let's see, sex education. Teaching students, let's say, inclusion there. Research shows they do not have received more likely to engage in sexuality. Most, even when informed of important students beginning at grade 6 to 11 kids, sex, well, whatever. Sure, it sounds like it's talking about sex education. The most important thing to me is the paper itself. So I grade the abstract somewhat, but usually what I do, honestly, is I read the paper, then come back and look at the abstract after to make sure that it was an adequate summary of the paper itself, because that's kind of what it's supposed to be. How am I going to grade a summary of a paper before I've read the paper? I don't know if it's a good summary until I've read the whole thing. Okay, so let's read through this research paper. It starts out with the introduction, so I have to make sure that the thesis gets mentioned by the end of the introduction. And hopefully there's going to be some sort of introduction that gives me background on the issue, whether that be, if we're talking about sex education, it's going to have to be the background of the consequences, I guess, of students not having a good sex education, or what the current world is like and what we're trying to fix. So let's see if she does that. With technology at our fingertips, the easy access to pornographic images and movies and websites can intrigue the interest of young adolescents. With this in mind, it's important for society to properly guide those who are still early in developing their moral compasses and senses of responsibility. Despite the common instincts of parents, though, completely shutting children off from thoughts and practical knowledge of sex can harm their futures more than telling them exactly how it works and how to treat it responsibly. Children should know the real consequences in having sex, not just something they see in movies because they are fantasized and unrealistic. Developing healthy behaviors and views of sex is especially important in rural areas, as these are the most plagued by issues of teen pregnancy and STDs. All rural public schools in the United States should implement a comprehensive sex education program in the 6th grade to increase awareness of the various consequences of sex and how it can affect students' futures. So I see comprehensive sex education program as the subject. I see rural public schools should implement one in the 6th grade as the claim. Increase awareness of the various consequences of sex, how it can affect futures as the reasoning. And I also see above like stuff about teen pregnancy and STDs, so that I assume that's what the futures part means down below. So that works for me. So I see a thesis. I'm happy with the thesis. It's there. It seems to contain all the parts it's supposed to contain, and so don't have to give it a 50. Let's move on from there. And I already know that all the research has been cited, so I can go and look it up later if I have any questions. But for the most part, I see it cited. I've checked its credibility, so that part's already been established. The most effective form of sex education would have to be a comprehensive type that encourages the act of being abstinent, while also informing students about various ways to have safe sex, protecting themselves from peer pressure, the different types of sexually transmitted diseases or STDs, the psychology effects of sex, and the true definition of what it means to have sex. However, according to Stanger Hall, much of this debate has centered on whether abstinence only versus comprehensive sex education should be taught. Some argue that sex education that covers safe sexual practices, such as condom use, sends a mixed message to students and promotes sexual activity. Comprehensive sex education allows students to hear the reason why beginning sexual activity at a young age can be risky and consequential. but those who do choose to become involved have the right to know how to protect themselves. Sex education should be understood thoroughly and not thrown into another course as an extra requirement for teachers to discuss slightly. So I like the use of the quote there. It seems like the use of the quote is good and fits with what she's trying to introduce the idea of the quote. So there is an argument between she says the most important is to have a comprehensive type that encourages the act of being abstinent while also telling students various ways. And the Stanger Hall source says, much of this debate is centered on whether abstinence only versus comprehensive should be taught, but the ones that cover safe practices send a mixed message. And she says, however, that comprehensive sex education allows them to hear why beginning sexual can be risky and consequential, but those do have the right to know. I mean, basically, she's given the quote a reason for being there. I sound like a dummy right now, but just she has a quote in the middle that's talking about how some say this, but honestly, it's more important that you go ahead and make that leap and say that yes, the comprehensive sex education, if you understand it thoroughly, and not throw it into a course as an extra requirement like a health class, will cover those ideas of both importance of being abstinent and the how to use condoms and things. And this is sort of what helps seal the deal a little bit is this next quote. By the time students reach 6th grade, up to 20% of the students have engaged in some kind of sexual activity. By the 6th, and by 8th grade, up to 42% have. Really? That's insane. The 6th grade is an ideal time to implement a program because boys and girls at that age are beginning to go through puberty and experience different hormones and emotions in their changing bodies. Since they are experiencing these changes, it's easier for them to truly comprehend and understand what these feelings mean. Yeah, I mean, when you have a birds and bees talk with a 5-year-old, that's a little early because they haven't even been going through body changes, so they don't understand like what's being talked about. According to a study conducted by Walcott and Tarquini, many college students remember the impact their sex education had on them. And I like how she's just constantly mentioning the research. Every time she's going to the next paragraph, it doesn't sound like she's making a point and then pulling in the research. It sounds like she read the research and she's like, well, what's the next article to logically go to next? Seems like this one. So these are like, now that she's talked about how starting it early can be important, she then moves on to say that students who are in college, what their experiences are once they got there. 71% majority stated that their sex education consisted of occasionally discussing sex during health or PE classes. And according to the results, the students who received a comprehensive sex education scored higher on HIV and STD knowledge than those who received an abstinence-only sex-based education. If we have a more elaborate form of sex education, middle school students can take that knowledge and protect themselves from diseases in pregnancy in high school and even after grade school is over. So she's sort of talking about how the future importance of knowing or going through a comprehensive sex education is to have more knowledge of how one gets HIV and other STDs. So that's really important to know because as they get to college, that might be the time when people say that they should, or maybe they're supposed to wait till marriage, but still, this really means that it does have a lasting effect. And that lasting effect is something to consider, and she's making that clear to me. Rural schools being looked over as an issue, so she's getting to another aspect of her thesis here. Rural schools being looked over as an issue because of the alarming rates of teen pregnancy. Blinn Pike introduces the idea that rural school administration believe there is no need for a sex education program because rural students are more isolated than urban students from dangerous temptations, including guns, drugs, violence, and sex. No. However, according to Piotrowski, adolescent parenthood is more widespread in the United States than in any other developed country and is most common in the rural United States. Adolescent birth rates in rural counties are nearly one-third higher than those in the rest of the country, although the birth rate among adolescents cut in half in major urban students by 40%. In suburban counties, between the decline in rural counties is only 31%. So, I mean, things are getting better, but they're not getting better as fast in rural counties, where I think it takes information longer to get to them. In addition to, there aren't these widespread programs put on by institutions that try to do this kind of stuff. It is a lot of like local administrators saying we don't want to put the idea of sex in their heads. Yeah, because we live in a world where students have just never heard of sex and are never going to figure it out. You give a student a phone, what do you think they're going to figure out? I mean, it's going to pop up eventually. So it's good to like concentrate on those rural schools that don't get as much of the institutional effects of STD and teen pregnancy prevention. There's more people who want to deny that their kids are capable of such things, but there are so few kids who are going through that stuff, and a lot of times the kid gets pregnant, they just put them in like alternative school, or like they don't want to see a pregnant kid around, so like I don't know, it's really weird. The approach here. So abstinence-only education is commonly practiced in rural areas because of religious influences. I would say that that's true. Teens are taught not to engage in any kind sexual activity until marriage. This type of sex education is controversial in its effectiveness due to religious aspects. I don't know that I like that word, influences, and creates issues between those who are religious and those who are not. According to Bay and Diamond, this type of sex education is limited to teaching that a monogamous marital heterosexual relationship is the expected standard of human activity, and that sex outside such a relationship would be physically and psychologically harmful. Debate regarding what to teach minors about sex is a political battle over defining American values. It's true. However, Bay does not acknowledge during this assessment if minors are taught and practice abstinence until marriage, the possibility of acquiring an STD or becoming pregnant is completely eliminated. I mean, that is true, but that's like, it's just like I think I talked about this I will talk about this in the peer review video as well, but it's kind of like the mask argument, right? So the CDC acknowledges that if they do a federal mask mandate, it will cut the number of deaths in half. Now, there's already a lot of deaths that are happening. And it's not, you're like, oh, okay, well, masks really don't work that well then if it only cuts it in half. But that's the CDC, when it has prediction models every year of the number of deaths, it factors in many different variables when they're figuring out how effective something is. So one of the reasons that they've said that it would only cut deaths in half, because when you do a federal mandates don't convince every single person out there to do a thing. A federal mandate will convince those who are law-abiding citizens to do it, but those who are not law-abiding citizens, those who are against law and order, the ones who will not wear masks, who believe in lawlessness, they will continue to not wear masks. So the idea here is that she's saying that because they're not saying abstinence-only education, or they're not preaching abstinence-only education, that they're not acknowledging the benefits of abstinence. No, it's if you do abstinence-only education, it can only go so far in helping people, because you're going to say don't have sex to some, and they'll say, oh, okay, I didn't realize. Okay, that works for me. And you say don't have sex to other people, and they'll go, yeah, all right. And then they won't have any knowledge of condoms and like how to be safe if they do have sex or when they do have sex, because they weren't going to listen anyway. Then it says America ranks the top country for most teen pregnancy among industrialized nations, according to Singh and Derrick. The United States has a teen pregnancy rate that is 9 times higher than the Netherlands, 4 times higher than France, nearly 5 times higher than Germany. She said, I like this instance here where she's quoting somebody else, Singh and Derrick, in the Blinn Pike article, which I actually like when students do that properly, and she does that properly here. I really like that. But she says abstinence-only sex education is not effective in its attempts to end teen pregnancy because it does not cover how to engage in safe sex with forms of birth control, such as condoms. Some teens, whether they are taught to wait until marriage or not, will still have sex. This is why we need a comprehensive education to not only teach kids not to have sex, but to keep them safe if they decide to do so. So it's a realistic look at things. It's like other countries that do this other thing, they have rates that are much, much lower than the United States. So they're worth looking into. And people like to act like the rest of the world doesn't exist, but it's good to look at the rest of the world and see like what they're doing and figure out why are we not able to achieve these same great results that they're achieving, and really just having that outside perspective. It says she ends with this specific program that's used with 6th grade students that she thinks would be effective, and I think that this is a neat idea. Be the Exception is a program that was implemented in 14 Indiana rural schools. This program consisted of 1,776 middle school students who were asked what their sexual activity levels were. According to Piotrowski, the program included focusing on promoting attitudes, skills, behaviors that support positive youth development. The emphasis is on a child's positive possible self and future self, school performance, and goal orientation. Topics include risk behaviors such as alcohol, drug, and peer violence. Program elements include activities that promote health, student readings, group exercise, demonstrations, take-home assignments to be worked on with parents. So that's a cool and comprehensive idea, it sounds. So she's providing a solution as well in this paper, not just outlining the problem. There was a 12-month follow-up to evaluate the effects of the program, and so when you have a long quote like this one I guess went on too long where she couldn't get it all done in that one set of like she did before. So you have to set this off, make it single space. So you can't just use that to make your page length longer. Longer quotes have to be specifically formatted. So if you try to use a whole bunch of long quotes to make your whole paper end up being quotes, that's not going to be good for your paper. So, be the exception had a strong positive impact on young adolescents, lower occurrence of ever having engaged in sexual intercourse, lower occurrence of sexual intercourse in the past 3 months, and lower occurrence of pre-sexual physical intimacy behaviors. Be the exception program students more often remained at the no activity, holding hands and hugging and kissing cumulative stages threshold, and were less often at the touching above and below the waist, other sex, and sexual intercourse cumulative stages. So that's good. It actually shows to have effects on preventing students from having sex while still telling them like how that works and giving them the measures by which to protect themselves. The various forms of teaching techniques allowed students to understand the consequences sex can have on themselves and their future. The Be the Exception program should be an example for all schools. With this program, less students engaged in sexual activity because they were thoroughly taught and shown what effects sex can have on their life. Also, with the positive impact this program made, there would be less teen pregnancy and STDs. The current government-funded abstinence-only program isn't effective in teaching students information about safe sex, peer pressure, and physical health. A new comprehensive program should be implemented in 6th grade to begin knowledge about sex sooner because of the growing pregnancy and STD rates. See how she's restating the thesis here in the conclusion in completely different words? Like it's the same ideas, it's worded, the whole sentence is reworded, so it's fresh. With a strong program, these rates would begin to decrease, covering all topic matter, not just abstinence, would eliminate any religious controversy, help students who do choose to have sex to be safe, and increase awareness about the harmful effects of STDs. It's really, really well done. I think it's the paper I would have given, what, a 70? I don't actually see the grade here. I think that's in the document where, I think it's here, where I show like my actual feedback. Yeah, I said, I don't understand the bad paragraph. Seems like you're arguing against yourself for a moment, which is what I said with the abstinence only. Like they're really saying it fails to understand that abstinence only. I think that was maybe a misconception on her part. Like she thought that she was required to have one article go against her point, but that wasn't the case. She could still have all the articles go with her point as long as they were scholarly, peer-reviewed academic journal articles. And I said, other than that, though, it's really, really good. It might just be the phrasing of the baby paragraph that bothers me. It sounds like the paragraph you're trying to say abstinence only is the way to go. Maybe you're really saying abstinence is really the only true form of protection, although other things should be taught too. There are other little minor issues throughout, such as going out of third person, having the formatting for internal citation slightly off, and I believe 1 or 2 grammatical mistakes, although I think I fixed the internal citation a little bit. Oh, no, it's just that she doesn't have, I don't believe in every single case the year and the page number maybe. But overall, this is quite good. And that might actually be something I should go back and fix so that when students are using this as an example, it is correct. So I actually gave her a 98. Wow, that's amazing. 1,279 words, so just above what you have to have. And I don't include the title page, abstract, or references page in the word count, just so you're aware. And I also say that being successful at such a short length is not typical. She was just very concise, said everything she needed to say, and she wasn't overly wordy, which made it effective. So how does it meet the research rubric criteria? And I think that's something that we should take a look at. So we've already looked at the research paper rubric. So in terms of how the paper meets that, it did contain the thesis, had a claim about what should happen, gave a general reason that claim should be trusted, avoided vague language, and included a solution with the Be the Exception program, but not until later. It wasn't in the thesis. The references were all good, credible, cited properly, same with the internal citations, and that's probably usually good enough as long as you're using your sources well. So she's not relying mostly on word source. She's not citing mostly individual experiences. It seems like studies that are done and arguments that are made. It's not focusing on a bunch of rare cases. I'm not seeing like one kid experienced this, one kid experienced that. There's a lot of research, so there's all 5 of the research is cited frequently. She's even going and citing another piece of research that's cited within one of her pieces of research to help, which is good. And then she has only scholarly peer-reviewed document journal articles. The only difference for her is that she has one Gale database article, but I specifically requested that at the time. But that was before Gale database kind of started going off the deep end and not having as much credible stuff. So now I've made it specifically academic search complete that has to do it. And she does use logic effectively. She moves from point to point. She says, once I heard about this aspect, we included it, so it's rural, so that she added as a 6th grade element. She keeps adding things that and comprehensive. She keeps adding ideas as they seem more relevant to what her discussion is. I don't see any rants from her. Her logic seems to be tested and accurate and measured. She's free of personal bias. I can't actually tell what her personal feelings are, although it almost seems like it's betrayed a little bit maybe in that personal, not personal bias paragraph, but the abstinence only paragraph. Maybe she's saying, well, abstinence only is the only way to truly protect, which is true, but I can't actually physically tell truly if that indicates that that's how she feels, like that people should go abstinence only, or not. So that's good. I shouldn't be able to tell that. Nor can I really tell if she really believes that this is how a program that should be done, or if she believes abstinence only really would be the best way. And that's how I want to feel at the end of the paper. It's just the evidence says this, and I still don't feel like she has a strong opinionated bias to this paper. This is good. The paper seemed very good in terms of like the formatting and looking right, title page, abstract, not a summary. Third person only, varied in style, phrases barely to grammatical, even typographical errors. And one thing I didn't look at was the go back and look at the abstracts, which can do that now because it'll make more sense now that we've read the whole paper. So sex education is a sensitive topic in schools today, especially at young ages. Introducing sex education early, however, has many benefits despite the notion to the contrary by some that teaching students about sex will encourage activity. While this may seem an intuitive conclusion to come to, its assumptions are mistaken. The research shows that those who do not receive a comprehensive sex education at a young age are more likely to engage in sexual activities, more likely to contract STDs, and more likely to get pregnant, even when a form of abstinence-only sex education is utilized. It is important that students beginning at grade 6 receive comprehensive sex education to save off this program replicate success to the exception program in Indiana. This is a pretty decent summary of what she covers, but in a nice short fashion. So it needs to be about 200 words. I think is about the max you would go. It's almost like an annotation. Somewhere between 125 and 200 words. Let's see how far I actually go on the abstract or how far she actually went if I do the word count on here. It looks like it's about, let's venture a guess. I'm going to say actually about 125 words seems to be that amount. Maybe 115? 128 words? Yeah, so I was 3 words off. So that's the abstract as well. That is how to use the research paper rubric. That is how to approach the research paper. Now, there is this really cool thing that I used to do with students where on this one, let's see, what was it, activity we would do? I don't have the opportunity to do that activity for us in class, but I had 3 articles, and if you want to take a look at them, you can. This is going to be like so quick though. So I have abortion being legal for those who actually need it, and I added this word count 1294 with an abstract article. If you want, you can actually pause the video on each one of these pages and then read it to understand. And then there's body cams for police. So if you want to stop and read, this one's 1290. This is the abstract. First page. Second page. Third page. Why is it doing that? Or actually, it's 6th page. 7th page. Then we have the references. And then the last one is cell phones for students. I would like to do this in class physically with students. Let's see, can we get all that? Okay. So we have this, and notice it's 1292. So they're all very close in word count, like literally down to like a couple of words. Then we have this abstract. Then we have this. And you'll just try to pause it on these pages. References. Okay, my question I would ask students is, one of these papers got an A, one of these papers got a B, one of these papers got an F, and to figure out which one it was. And I wasn't actually pointing at which one got the A, B, and the F. I was just doing A and B and an F. So one of them is about abortion, one of them is about body cams for police, and one is about cell phones for students in schools. My question was which essay got the A, which essay got the B, which essay got the F. based on a first-time submission in my class. I feel like there's another point I was going to make. And I would break the students into groups, and I would say, hey, y'all all come up with which one of these you think got the A, B, and F. And they would all report back to me, and then I would tell them which one got the A, which one got the B, which one got the F. So if you want to stop, you want to go back and pause and like try to figure that out on your own to try to figure out what I'm looking for. You can go ahead and do that now and pause. And I guess maybe I'll put like a square in here that says pausing for if people want to look at those articles. Okay, so going back over here, if we look at the, I actually don't remember. So we go to the abortion article, let's see. Remember what the very first thing I do is on all articles is I go down and I look at the source citations. So let's see, I have Craddock, Foster, Jones, Meyer, and Madoff. I've got DOI numbers for all these articles except one which has an AN number, which is good enough for me. It looks like they actually accidentally, no, it's the correct one. They just, I guess, included a web link retrieved from, that's an interesting approach. But that works. So that's what they did. And now I got to make sure that it includes all of the, let's see, Craddock. Yep. Foster. Yep. Jones. See, my students never do this part. They always just start reading the paper. When I told you the very first thing I do is start checking for the articles. So that one's got all of its articles cited. Let's go to the other one. Body cams. And we have aerial. Stasio. Mech. Newell. Yep. Nielsen. Okay, and then we have cell phones for students. Go down to the references page. Beth. Maybe it's under that humble part. Humble. Faden. That's not good. Burns. Okay, we have the Burns article in there. Diamantes. Maybe just Diamantes. No. How about Diam? No. Ooh, that's not good. Gerard is cited. And then Tyndall. So that's, okay, so I'm missing, I don't see Beth, Humble, Faden. One trick I sometimes try to use is look for parentheses. Maybe that'll help me. St. Gerard. I assume that's also Gerard. Gerard. It's a heck of a lot of Gerard. Tyndall. Burns. Gerard. FXers. That's not one of the sources on the references page. Burns. That's it. So let me see if I can find maybe if I can find it manually. Well, what was the other source? It wasn't even included. I don't see any other names. And by the way, if I get to this point where I'm looking at things up manually, that's going to annoy me. Tyndall, Burns, going off during class, St. Gerard, FXers, that's not even one of our sources. Yeah. So before I've even started, here's the little thing: is a lot of students will read these papers and they'll say this one's got to be the B, body cam's got to be the A, and the abortion's got to be the F. But here's the problem: the abortion paper I actually gave an 80. The body cams paper I gave like a 95 or something standard, maybe a 97. But this paper gets an F the first time because it's not citing all of its sources. It doesn't matter what any of the stuff in the paper is. I haven't even read this yet, and I know that it's an F. So then I can go and read the other two papers, and the abortion paper very clearly in the beginning, I think makes a couple of different errors or something, and the body cams paper stays pretty much on track the entire time. So it ends up working out where the abortion paper gets the B, the cell phone paper gets the F, and the body cam paper gets an A. And that's what I've been reading. So I just wanted to do that for you to impress upon you the importance of what I said when talking about this rubric is that the references page and sources being cited internally, that is key. If you do not do that, you are really going to be unhappy with the results that you have. So make sure that when you submit, you include your references page, you cite everything internally, or we're going to go back and forth with me asking you to submit it again until you get it right. And we don't want that. So that is the research paper and how to submit it. Now, I will caution you, do not submit it first to the research paper link. Remember, submit it to the peer review first, and then when you submit it to the peer review, and I'll tell you this in the peer review video in more detail, you basically click the peer review link, create a thread, upload your draft to your paper, then go to the other threads because you'll be able to see them. Look at 3 other people's papers. It has to be ones that have not already had 3 peer reviews. So go to the new ones that don't have had 3 peer reviews. And you read one of the papers, give it some feedback, 100 words of feedback. Read another paper, give it 100 words of feedback. And another paper, give it 100 words of feedback. Once you've done those 4 things, submit your own and then read 3 and give feedback. Then you'll be unlocked so you can submit the research paper, and not until then. So I don't even think I'm going to make an extra video about how to submit the research paper. I'm just going to say after you've submitted the peer review and after it, you should hopefully, if you do it on Thursday night, then on Friday you should come back and say, hey, can I submit the research paper now? And if you've, well, actually, I mean, if you've done all your feedback stuff, then you're ready to go. So there's no reason even waiting to figure it out because you're not waiting for a grade this time. So just whenever you get all the research paper peer review items done, then you can submit the paper. And I would keep a close watch on that first weekend because I'm going to go through all of those and check to make sure that all the references pages are there, the internal citations are there. If they are not, I am going to go and, give a 0 to those and say, please resubmit. I will grade it once it's resubmitted with these items in place. Just, be aware that that is something that is very important, something that I have to have done so that I can give credit. I believe that's all we need to talk about for submitting the research paper. Just make sure you are uploading a document, you're not. And then the quiz, it's actually due. It says due Sunday 11/22, but also it's an optional quiz, and so you could technically do by final exam week 12/13. I mean, it doesn't really matter when you get it done. So it's now technically due Sunday 11/22, but it's going to be available the whole rest of the semester. So don't feel forced to read this book for an optional quiz during that 1 week. Now, after your research paper is submitted, remember we have Thanksgiving week, so in class, the physical classes, all I'm going to do is talk to you about how to do the presentation that week. I remind everybody that Thanksgiving is this week. Everything goes completely online, and this video right here is going to be about the research presentation. So if you're not able to make it to class that week because you're already going out of town for Thanksgiving. I'll just be on the video talking about the research presentations and how to do it, as well as Launchpad, reminding people to do the Launchpad stuff, and the final exam and how to keep from having to do the final exam, and the column on Blackboard to pay attention to see if you do, because there is an essay average column. So as you see once you see all of your essay grades come in, that column will have the correct grade, or should, where it's got it all factored out properly. It's basically 100 divided by 6, giving 2 portions of that to the research paper because it's worth 20%. And then you can check and see that kind of stuff. But I wish you the best luck on this grading stuff. If you have any kind of questions, just email me. Do come back and watch the research paper presentation video next week. Hopefully it's going to be a pretty easy presentation to do. It's not going to take you too much effort. But if you got the paper done, you are basically done with the class, with the exception of the presentation and in the Launchpads if you haven't done them yet. So that's awesome. Give yourself a pat on the back. However, if you're just sitting here and you're like listening to me say, hey, go write the research paper, and you haven't done it yet, then you wait till you pat yourself on the back until you've actually done the thing. So make sure you submit that peer review first, then the paper, then do the presentation once you've watched my video. Y'all have a great day. Great Christmas. Have a merry holiday. But if this is the spring you're watching this, have a great, I don't know, May, April, whatever the date it is then. Bye.